Thank you so much for being the kind of people who care about gathering in person and making a difference in the world. And thank you for supporting our Big Foolish project in the middle of the Texas Hill Country. I think it's really important that we're grateful to God for all of the creation that creates all that food, but the secretaries and the truck drivers and the farmers and the people washing our food and packaging our food and making it into pasta. There's so many people that touch every meal that we eat. It's literally like a miracle. It is a miracle. And so I just want to have us get presents to that gratitude before we eat this meal that my family grew a lot of, and put that love and energy in co-creation with God. So let's be grateful. Let's thank God for blessing this food, blessing all of us. Let all of us go back out into the world from Daniel's presentation feeling freer and understanding how that we can be the most free sovereign citizens that we can be. And let's continue to give all of our appreciation to God for all that He provides for us every single day. In Jesus' name, amen. So if we could all put our hands together for Daniel Mentz and say thank you so much for coming out and talking to us. I'm so honored to have all of you here, and I'm so honored that you came. Thank you for making the effort.
Thank you, Molly. It's a pleasure and an honor. So my name is Daniel Mentz. I am the National Status and Passport Director at the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship. You can see our website right there, sacredhonoref.com. We have a complimentary membership where you can check out more. I'm going to be going through all this pretty fast because we have a lot of ground to cover, but I'll leave some time open at the end for Q&A, because this is a very deep well, a deep rabbit hole, if you will, and there's lots to talk about, so let's get straight into it. So this is us. This is Michael Joseph next to me. He's the founder of the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship. Marsha Ann, she's our elder counsel. She's been doing this kind of work for over 35 years. So all this hidden law and what some people call the alternative legal system, which is not really alternative, it's the original constitutional legal system. But she's been doing this for 35 years, and she's an advisor on our board. And then Phil Mederi, he's the director for the Equity Passage pathway. I'll talk about equity and all the other pathways that we have later on. So my presentation is really an abbreviated version of our documentary called Breaking the Spell. And if you become a complimentary member, you can watch the whole documentary for free inside our membership. It's not available to the public, it's not on YouTube, it's not on Vimeo, so this is only available to private members. So what is a spell? Well, Oxford English Dictionary tells us a spell is an ability to control or influence people as though one had magical power over them. And this is really an illusory spell that we're going to be breaking today, that we as human beings are powerless and exist inside of a system that we must derive our power from, when in fact the truth is the exact opposite. The truth is that we are powerful beyond measure, and the system derives its power from us, the people, because without us there would be no government, right? There would be nothing to be governed. And we're going to talk about all this from the lens of law primarily, because law is utilized as a tool of the predominant system to govern society. It has been like that for a long time. And most people today do not understand, or in the worst case, even fear law, legal system, financial systems, and many are trying to avoid it or even protect themselves from, not even wanting to engage and want nothing to know and want nothing to do with that, which is understandable. However, that's exactly the type of mindset that keeps the system perpetuating itself. And I'll show you why. So the system is not what most people think nor expect. And I'm going to break that down for you today, because simply put, it's a dual system. It has both you being a subject to the system through jurisdiction. On the other half, however, you can be in a complete position of individual power. And we'll talk about how this dualistic system plays itself out over and over. Because when you want to control a people, you need to first remove the true selection of all the options that people have. Would you agree with that? Right? You want to control a system, you want to take away all the things that would make the people inside the system be empowered, so you have control over them, right? So, and this goes in line with the programming. Some of you may have studied how mind control works. And this is basically how the public is steered in the program. They call it a TV program for a reason. And it creates an illusion of control because this external system programs meanings, values, and a false sense of security into people. And basically it's telling us that we need protection from things that are inherently natural. Look at how much Ireland and Mali have been fighting to regenerate the soil. How much effort does it take for us to tell the government, hey, we need to restore the soil, to restore human health, right? So there's an aspect of this whole system that tells us, stay away from nature and just come into the fiction. What I mean by fiction is, we'll talk about it too. So everything's controlled, contrived, the options are limited, and this phenomenon, by the way, is not just experienced here. This is happening all across the world. So yes, we'll be talking about the Constitution in America, but everything that you're going to see today really is happening all across the world, unfortunately. However, as sentient moral beings, we somehow have an inner feeling or a deeper knowing that we have inherent natural rights, God-given rights, right? The Constitution actually talks about that. God-given rights, and then enshrined those rights in the Bill of Rights. So what happened? What happened? What happened to those rights? Well, when you are in that position, when you know you have inherent rights, and then you look outside yourself, this fictional governing overlord is dictating how I live my life, and telling me and regulating me and taxing me and this and that. So I'm not really in my God-given right. And why is that? So that's what we're going to be doing today, breaking the spell of the societal programming that we are actually have been blinded to our own power and our true place in the world. So let's expand your reality through a liberating expose on the history of law and who you actually are in this system. And to do that, we're going to gain answers to these initial questions, and I'm sure many of you have had those questions. How did we design our lives to look for authority to give approval for every facet of our lives? How did we get into a place where we ask permission to manage our personal affairs from the government? How does the state have the power to shut down your business or revoke your license for non-compliance with a dictate? Who experienced that in 2020? Right? Almost all of us did. Why does it seem as if our basic rights are not being honored or being outright ignored? How do we as moral, autonomous, sovereign souls peacefully live free from all these encumbrances? What don't we know that empowers us to seize autonomy and creativity to bring our lives forward with what we desire and what serves us truly and the generations that will come after us? So we will need to explore the distinction between the concepts of the natural world of the constitutional republic and the fictional world of democracy. What is the United States, and why is it different from the United States of America, the republic? And how the entire system is navigated through commerce and contracts. We'll also explore what are the implications of being a 14th Amendment citizen, or commonly known as a US citizen. What is really operating within your birth certificate, and how does income tax really work? What is money? How does the financial system really work? The two parts of the system, public and private, to illuminate the power of the private and the illusions of the public, and why waking out of this perpetuated program is a choice to either live in self-governance aligned with your rights, or to be governed by another external force outside of yourself. So let's talk about democracy versus republic first. And Dan Smoot, he was a broadcaster in the 1960s. He was a resigned FBI agent actually, because he started seeing what's really going on. So then he turned to the public and warned us about many of the things that we're experiencing today. So I highly recommend you check out Dan Smoot. You can find his videos still in archival websites. Maybe they're on YouTube, maybe not. But he also wrote a book. He wrote several books actually, but this one, The Invisible Government. He was one of the first people to actually talk about all this stuff in the public. Right? He warned us a long time ago. So there's a video specifically called A Republic, Not a Democracy, that was released in 1966. So I highly encourage you to view that. That's also part of the resources if you become a free member with us. So let's look at the distinctions. Under democracy, It is aimed at universal equality. Everyone's the same, right? It's subject to the mob rules and government intervention, and eventually always ends up in a dictatorship and a demise of the people. A republic, on the other hand, specifically this republic, is based on individual liberty, upholding the individual's rights, unalienable natural rights protected by the Constitution, right to bear arms, freedom of speech, and earn a living. Now, democracy is a product of fictional legal laws made by bureaucrats, created through convention or enactment. Alienable rights granted or privileges by the government. So basically, you are getting your rights, not in the form of rights, but in the form of privileges and immunities from the government. Now, the republic, on the other hand, is based on a constitution protecting fundamental natural rights or unalienable rights. It's self-evident, it's inherent, and it's protected by the Constitution, based on principles that protect everyone's right to live freely. It's not a privilege to live freely. And the founders recognized that. That's why they had to protect it and enshrine it in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And as Ben Franklin said, of course, a republic if you can keep it. Who was he talking to when he said you? We the people. He didn't say, oh yeah, we created a government and we'll take care of everything, just sit back and relax. No, he knew how fragile a republic of this nature can be, and he replaced the responsibility of keeping this public alive on every single American. Because you know, if we don't keep it, someone else will take it over. So unfortunately, the true history, much of the true history, not all, but the true history of the republic, the old republic, if you will, has been lost. And we'll uncover some of those bits and pieces today. But when you ask people today, well, what form of government do we live in? Most of them will say what? A democracy. Why? Because it's perpetuated in the media, in the news, by government itself, in books. But really, that's not true. Because Ben Franklin didn't say a democracy if you can keep it. So again, these two systems are actually running in a mirrored parallel. We have a constitutional republic governed by the people, protected by principles, and empowering the individual authority. But then we also have this corporate democracy where rules are created by trending virtues and values that erode true individual authority. Now let's talk about the second system, this corporate democracy. It functions through what? Permits, licenses, statutes, regulations, and codes, certificates. All these terms, you can't find them in the Constitution. That wasn't part of the Republic. So what happened? Well, the Republic actually is still alive and well. The form of government that promotes individual liberties. And we see that every day with members from the fellowship. It's just been hidden so well. So basically, every single American has the choice. You can self-govern according to the original constitutional republic, or you can be governed by the corporate democracy. So let's actually explain this through some critical points in law. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 states, no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payments of debts, pass any bill of attainder ex post facto law or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. Now let's break down just two of these highlighted sections to illuminate what we're talking about here. So obviously we know that, okay, gold and silver are being used as lawful money, as lawful tender to settle and close debts. Before the Civil War, that's basically how people paid their debts, through gold and silver. And then of course we had gold and silver backed currency, and I'll show you those notes as well, those bills later. So we had a real world asset backed currency. And as it says, no law shall be passed to impair the obligation of contracts. So what does that actually mean in a simple sense? Well, it means that contracts are actually the supreme law. A contract today is required in most, if not all, legal and commercial transactions. You always have to sign stuff, don't you? All the time. Do you actually read the contract? How many people actually sit down and read the contract? And it goes even further. When you sign up for an online service, what is underneath in small print before you hit enter, you put in your information. By clicking this box, I agree to the terms and conditions and privacy policy. Who actually reads those? What do you actually agree? We have one. Yes. Okay, as you read them, okay. Well, whoever reads them, it's important to read them. Because most people don't even know what they're agreeing to. They just want the benefit of whatever service they're signing up for. So this is important. Contracts is the supreme law as we move forward, because this is going to keep repeating from different angles. Because the law, as the Constitution says, the law is inside of the contract, not outside of it. When you agree to a contract and you consent to it, the contract is actually protected by the First Amendment of the Organic Constitution. As it says, the state cannot impair the obligations of the contract. The state cannot regulate the contract, it cannot make it wrong or right, it cannot rewrite it, and it cannot make it go away. That is the power of a contract. And now you know why you constantly have to sign stuff, because it actually can supersede the Constitution. The Constitution actually upholds contracts as the supreme law. Now, of course, we agree to contracts in a variety of ways every single day, and many are invisible, yet binding. Do any of these look familiar? No? Loans, banking, cell phones, employment, IRS, Social Security, birth certificates, driver's license, voter registrations, and of course, taxes. All day, every day, we have to sign stuff. We have to enter into contracts without fully knowing what they actually contain. Now, it's not that inherently the system has power over us, but it's because we allow this corporate state power over us by virtue of the contract. We obligate ourselves to. We're consenting to these contracts. We're entering them every single day without knowing what they really mean, just because it's custom. Because, hey, everyone's doing it, so I should be doing it too. As the Constitution clearly states, the law is within the contract. So to make a little side note here, if the contract does not explicitly state that your Bill of Rights is upheld, then guess what? When you sign that, you don't have access to the Bill of Rights. Anything that is not contained within the contract and you're consenting to it, that's it. Whatever rights the contract assigns to you, that's all you get. Many contracts don't even assign you any rights, if any. And if they do, then it's just very limited. So rights and protections are waived voluntarily, either knowingly or unknowingly. Our protected rights are waived with consent in exchange for benefits and privileges of a contract. And this is really, once you realize that everything's operating from contract, this is now the first step into unlocking yourself and stepping out of these unnecessary contractual obligations, or as some people refer to them as prisons. Because really, a contract can compel you to do something or not do something. This is a core power that we all have. And every single one of us has this core power to self-govern our lives. Once we understand how the system really functions, we can completely do a 180 and use it actually to our benefit and step out of the contracts that no longer serve us, or use the contract in a conscious way. And that's when you realize, oh, I cannot claim to be a victim anymore because I volunteered for all of it. Everything that's happening right now with our government, we allowed it to happen. It's our fault. Ben Franklin told us, if you can keep it, have we been keeping it? Is the question. We've been led astray. So let's talk about how this actually happened. But it was really the most genius or diabolical, whichever way you want to put it, it's both, way to trick us into contracting ourselves out of our rights. And they did this by, again, doing this mirrored parallel public versus private system. So we've all heard about public versus private in these terms: public bank, private corporation, public corporation, school, private property, all that stuff. But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're going to go a little bit deeper. So let's look at the actual dollar. You all have them in your wallets, I hope, still. Every single dollar has this sentence written on it. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. What did we learn earlier about what the Constitution says, that all debts, public and private, should be settled with gold and silver? So what happened? This is not gold, this is not silver, it's not even backed by anything anymore. Notice it doesn't say this dollar is legal tender, it says note. A little side note here also, if you want to look up, who's familiar with Black's Law Dictionary? A few of you. Okay, so Black's Law Dictionary is the gold standard for the legal system. This is the legal dictionary that all lawmakers use to define words. Judges use it, Congress uses it, the whole system uses it. So if you want to do a little homework, look up the word note inside Black's Law Dictionary. And you'll find that a note is not money. I'll leave it at that. So the public is really a creation or a creature of the state. Because the public policy, for example, what is that for? Policing the public. It doesn't say private policy. So public policy is applying to everyone who identifies being part of the public system through benefits such as driver's license, social security, all the other contracts that we talked about. Because those can be regulated because they are in the public. Now, the private, however, on the other side, these are self-governing individuals who consciously navigate their obligations and their contracts, and therefore they are the living law that the founders talked about and the founders protected. Private or public, really what it comes down to, what contract is involved in the matter. So if you're getting a presentment, some kind of bill in the mail, one of the taxing agencies says, you owe us this bunch of money. They're like, what? I didn't expect that. Well, what kind of contract is that? Why are they harassing you in this way? Most likely because you entered some kind of public contract where they told you in some fine print that they can come after you whenever they want. So think of it like this. The United States is like a club that we joined via the contract. We were talking about HOAs and POAs earlier. That's really what it is. And whatever the contract of, who's in an HOA? Okay, a few of you. Some of them are actually good, but most of them, they become dictators, don't they? And they can tell you what to do and not do on your own land, even if you paid it off. What's up with that? That's not private property. And you have to pay them dues every year, and they can raise them whenever they want. We were talking about in their POA, they had some kind of ballot where they basically allowed you to vote for an empty covenant, they called it. Empty covenant basically meant that all the POA members, they could vote for something that they didn't even know what they were voting on. And the POA would then insert whatever they wanted later on. This is how far they have taken this concept of contracts to contract us out of our natural God-given rights. This means that the corporate state, we'll talk about the history too, but essentially this corporate democracy, corporate state had to create its own fictional citizens in order to regulate them. Because the state can only regulate that which it created. We'll talk about that too. Therefore, if you identify with this public corporate system, now they can rule over you, and you're funding it too, because that's part of the contract. Your energy and your currency is being funneled into that system because you agreed to it. Just because you didn't know, ignorance of the law is no excuse. We've heard that before. But the people of the land, the true living men and women who are natural, those are private. Why? Because they are not engaged in these public contracts. Because living private people are not public until a contract ties them into the public system. There's a big movement that's growing every year, which is the private birthing and the home birthing, where you don't have a birth certificate for your child. You don't give them a social security number. This is why. Because as soon as you do, guess what? Now your child is part of the public system through contract. Now, if your child does have that and is part of the contract, that's not the end of the world, because there's ways to navigate out of them again. That's the beauty of it all. So there is a good ending to all of this. I know it can get depressing. But a public contract pulls the living man or woman into suretyship with the fictional citizen to animate the corporate system. So you're basically saying, yeah, I'll be collateral for this system voluntarily. And you can regulate and mandate and dictate me however much you want. Now, they don't tell you that outright. They don't say it outright like this, but that's basically what we're in. I like to say, really, that we're living in a modern corporate version of the ancient feudal system. The ancient feudal system, pledging allegiance to a lord, and they can do whatever they want. This intent of the system is to basically cast a spell on living people that they have to be part of the public, because otherwise you can't function. Well, guess what? You can get a passport without having a birth certificate, without having a social security number. Yeah, people are doing it. Why? Because they have to honor the private side of the government. They have to honor the original constitutional republic. We're seeing it every day with our members. So, because we the people are the creators. We created this whole thing in the first place. We are the spiritual beings. We have the power to change reality. We are the authority or the currency of the system. Our energy animates this whole thing. If we didn't participate in the economy, would there be an economy? We're animating this whole thing. We animate the fiction, not knowing it's a fiction. But that's why millions of Americans are waking up to this now and saying, wait a second, I don't want to participate in this anymore. So living private men and women are the true sovereigns, the ones that are protected by the Bill of Rights. So again, the key distinction between public and private is how contracts are determining you to be either or. You're either private or public when you enter these contracts. And so, of course, most of these contractual obligations that tie you into the public are hidden. Most people don't realize that they're even in a contract. And that's unfortunately why these contracts can compel you to do something or not do something. Like we talked about the HOA, you can't build this on your land. Oh, what do you mean? I paid for this thing. Well, you're part of our HOA. We can tell you what to do or not do. So they can compel your performance. And in essence, really, the federal system of the United States is not the United States of America, the original republic. That's protected by limited delegated powers of the first organic constitution. And here's proof for that. You can do this right now if you want. Look up Title 28 of the U.S. Code, 28 U.S.C. United States Code, paragraph 3002, subsection 15. And here's a screenshot of that. United States, in quotation marks, by the way. Whenever they put something in quotation marks, it means nothing can be added or subtracted from it. That is the word, that is the definition, and that's all there is to it. So look what it says. United States means a federal corporation. It's been in the U.S. Code for a long time. It's been in front of your face your whole life. You just never knew where to look. B, an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of the United States. Or C, an instrumentality of the United States. It doesn't say of America. Does it say country? Does it say nation? Does it say land? No, it's a corporation. And here's, if you don't believe Google, you can look up the Cornell Law School. There it is again. United States means a federal corporation. So, if nothing else from tonight, you take away, whenever you see now the United States, just those two words, in the media, on social media, in Congress, wherever you look, if you just see those two words, you are looking at the federal corporation. You're not looking at representatives of the country. Now, a lot of them wear both hats, like the U.S. Secretary of State, for example, because they have to. Now, is this parallel system unconstitutional? Well, unfortunately not really, because again, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 says you can enter into any contract that you like. And it is the supreme law, if you consent to it. That's how much power we actually have. So let's talk about some significant history of how this actually happened. The early years of America's existence, people exchanged goods, gold, silver, real world value for trade. It was a quid pro quo, value for value in equal exchange. No taxes were assessed or paid to Great Britain, and no tribute or interest was made. It's funny how there's very little information about pre-Civil War America. Have you ever noticed that? They don't teach you about pre-Civil War America in school very much. They talk about, yeah, the founding, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're here at the Civil War. Oh, wait, what happened in between? But we actually lived as free people. So then the history, the timeline, okay, 1775, King George III outlawed interest-free and independent currencies to the colonies because he realized they were becoming too independent. They were becoming too strong and he was losing control. So that was obviously a driving factor that led to the quest for independence and war with England. Now let's move forward to 1788 for the first organic constitution that was drafted and ratified. And so the original constitution for the United States of America, and this is not a typo by the way, United States lowercase and states lowercase, we do that on purpose because again, as you saw, when you put something into quotation marks, it has weight, it has meaning. This, basically, the original Constitution was a trust. It was created as a trust that became the operating system for this new republic. And the representatives for we the people retained the sovereign capacity of the people and their posterity. Delegated only limited powers of government, intending to make a more perfect union. Well, more perfect than what? The Articles of Confederation and the Articles of Association. So what they had learned before Now they perfected it. The powers enumerated as necessary for the collective benefit of the states and the people. It was a kind of a mutual aid compact. And it was a firewall of protection from usurpation or expansions of powers not delegated in the 10th Amendment. Well, what does it say? The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. But it's either the states or the people. Meaning that the states had sovereign power and the people within them had sovereign power. Didn't talk about the federal government overlord. So this in essence means the organic constitution limits the powers of government so we, the people, can self-govern. We can live our lives the way we know is best for us. And the republic was comprised, and still is, and is being repopulated now, thank goodness, of living men and women to have rule, reign, and dominion over land, sea, and air as Creator intended. Let's go back to the timeline here. In 1868, this is a very little known fact and very little talked about, but this basically enabled the system to become what it is today. The Lieber Code established a civil, not common law, but civil law and military rule. Let's talk about the Lieber Code. So obviously during the Civil War period, there were disagreements around economics, and some states desired and actually did secede from the Union. So that then basically abandoned the Union. The Union was disbanded and collapsed, essentially. So in order to protect the Union, Lincoln signed off on the Lieber Code, General Order 100. It was the first executive order. How many executive orders have come out of the White House since then? 6,000? 13,000. See, I didn't even know that number, but there you go. So this was the first one, the Lieber Code. What did it do? It established federal military control over all the contested states. And Lincoln justified these actions as being authorized by the war powers that were granted in the Constitution during times of war. And war powers hasn't really changed, as we can see today. Our country can go to war whenever it wants. Are we consenting to it? No. They can declare war on anyone, right now. And there's nothing we can do. This hasn't changed since then. And General Order 100, or the Lieber Code, was never officially revoked. Even though the South surrendered, there's no peace declaration. Where's the peace declaration? A war isn't over until there's peace declared, and the Lieber Code is still enacted. And that's why the government has to continue to use emergencies. Look up how many emergencies there are currently active. It's like 43 or something. What happens when you engage war powers? You suspend the Constitution. And you govern through military and civil law. Civil law, again, is a law system that is given by a government to the people. And they can also take that away, as we saw in 2020. Let's move on to 1871, the Organic Act, as it's called, even though it did the exact opposite. The District of Columbia was reconstructed into a corporation. You saw the evidence in the US Code. This is when it started, 1871. This was the beginning of the Reconstruction period that lasted truly until 1933. So what did it do? Well, it created a parallel corporate structure. It did have limited delegated powers, and both with jurisdiction confined only to the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C., where the federal government supposedly has the only jurisdiction. And yes, that means we have at least 2 constitutions for the United States. Some people say there's 4, but we know for sure that there's 2. One of the Constitutional Republic from 1788, and then the other one in 1871, that was a corporation. So it mirrored, it copied and pasted basically everything that was there before, but it allowed itself the leeway to change whenever it wants and become more into a corporation. So after the Organic Act of 1871, all the states had to what? Ratify and submit new constitutions. They had to include the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment into their constitutions. So each state had to create a mirror copy, a corporate mirror copy of its original state constitution in order to be readmitted into the new union. And this created the new corporate union of states. which basically turned every state into municipal corporate subdivisions of the United States corporation based in Washington, D.C. So that's why you see, for example, a good example is California. For as much as we don't like what's happening in California, and I live there, man, I'm so numb to it already. But when you look at the flag, what does it say? It says California Republic. It doesn't say State of California on the original flag. And some state flags have just the name, for example, of their state. It doesn't say State of whatever on the actual flag. So these states are still flying their pre-Civil War flags where they're telling you the truth every single day. That, yeah, technically we're in a dual system, and it's your choice which one you want to live in. And this is what it looks like. The United States Corporation was basically a mirror copy that was overlaid over the organic United States Republic. And it mirrored, and it was so subtle and it was so quiet with it. And of course, we were reeling from the effects of the war, so we didn't really have the bandwidth to really understand what's going on. So that's basically the best way to visualize it, right? It's a federal corporate democracy overlay, a matrix, if you will, that sucked all the people from the land up into this fiction. And it did so through contracts. So let's explore contracts for this. The Organic Act came after the 13th Amendment. Now, by the way, just a side note, the 13th Amendment after the Civil War was not the original 13th Amendment. There's an original 13th Amendment that was properly ratified in the early 1800s. That, at this, did not allow lawyers to hold political office. So during the Civil War, all of a sudden, that original 13th Amendment, the libraries were burned, Library of Congress, somehow the original 13th disappeared. But there are a few surviving copies, and if you're interested, I can show you a scan from the original 13th. But to keep going here, the 13th, the second 13th, prohibited slavery and involuntary servitude. But what did it not say? It did not say that it prohibited voluntary servitude. So this is a concept called legal by omission. You can ask any attorney about it. They know what it means. Legal by omission basically says that when you don't expressly state something that is outlawed, then by omission it's legal. So that's the trickery again. This is how subtle and slick this stuff is. Voluntary servitude is perfectly legal and lawful. You can volunteer into servitude by contract if you want to. And this then basically allowed free men or freed slaves the ability by choice to volunteer into 14th Amendment U.S. citizen, federal citizenship via the federal U.S. corporation. Now at that time, they didn't know it was a corporation, but we certainly know now. And then after that, one thing I'll say here too is ever since the 14th Amendment, by default, every American baby born thereafter would automatically become a 14th Amendment federal citizen, no longer being born into the original organic constitutional republic. Now we can undo that. It's actually pretty simple to undo that. And this is part of the things that we share in the fellowship. But as a 14th Amendment citizen, you only have claim to privileges, immunities, and it talks about public obligations. It was a public contract. So, well, what happened to my unalienable rights? Sometimes we like to say unalienable, because they can lean against their title. But let's talk about unalienable, as it was spelled out in the Constitution. Your rights cannot be given away or taken away. The protections offered by the Organic Constitution, there's no question about it. And there cannot be a lien against you, even if you enter into a contract. Now, alienable rights are related to title. What title, what status do you have? And you certainly can be liened against you through contracts. So alienable is civil law, civil rights. Okay? Unalienable is God-given rights protected by the Constitution. So as a 14th Amendment then, as a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen of the United States, have you ever noticed that it doesn't say of America? It doesn't say USA citizen. We know the definition for United States, right? So you are a citizen of the federal corporation. Anyway, so the 14th Amendment citizen then became a corporate fictional person or a title, and it could be liened against the title of that corporate person. And of course, that's what they're doing every single day. So the Organic Constitutional Bill of Rights talks about the words, again, we're talking about legal definitions, lawful definitions, people, rights, land reservation, powers not delegated to the government. The 14th Amendment, however, when you look at that language, is completely different. It talks about persons and privileges and immunities. It's very contractual, very commercial in its language. Very different from the Bill of Rights. And there's many court cases, too, that talk about that as a 14th Amendment citizen, you basically don't have any rights because, specifically, the Bill of Rights was not included in the 14th Amendment. Supreme Court has talked about this 4 times over the past century. I can show you all the case law. So the 14th Amendment was drafted as a contract. That's how they got around the whole thing. Because, as we saw earlier, a state cannot impede upon the obligations of a contract. So if you obligate yourself into a 14th Amendment federal citizen, the states cannot do anything about it. It's your personal choice. You volunteered into it. Okay? So the power of a contract is held inviolable by declaring that no state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of a contract. So it's your obligation, if you volunteered into this contract, to uphold it. And this is how we break free from the spell, and this is how we can step outside of this fictional system, by realizing it's all just contracts. Again, we're seeing this over and over again. Look at Webster's dictionary. You can still find some online PDF version, or if you can be lucky enough to find an original one, from 1828. Again, this is pre-Civil War. This was the standard legal dictionary that Americans used to create laws, Congress used to make laws, right? So when we look up person, in the Webster's dictionary, it says an individual human being consisting of body and soul, a man, woman, or child. Now when we look at person in Black's Law Dictionary, which became the gold standard after the Civil War, it has actually pages and pages of contradicting definitions, but some of the more highlighted ones here are a corporate person, a vessel, or a partnership. Are you any of those things? Right? No. So, drafting the definitions in the contract, these definitions become the law based on the jurisdiction of that contract. Whoever created the contract creates the definition of what the words mean inside that contract. And if you are not any wiser and you enter that contract, guess what? You're consenting to all of it. Again, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And that pulls you from the private and into the public. This is how they basically made living men and women a contractual fiction and entered them into the federal corporation. And this happened over decades, right? This wasn't overnight. But when you look at the more detailed timeline, it was like brick by brick. It was installed from 1871, basically, or 1868, with the 14th Amendment included, all the way up to 1933. Let's talk about compelling performance, how they can do all this to you. Well, let's say, as an example, the IRS files a complaint against you that you owed them money and you didn't pay. And then there's a court case. The judge orders confiscation of personal, private documents and banking records. They come, kick in your door, take all your stuff, and then you have to go to court. All right, well, you think you're smart and you go to the court and you ask the judge to dismiss the case under the 4th Amendment. Unreasonable search and seizure, Judge. Well, guess what the judge is going to say? The Constitution has no place in this matter. What? Why? Well, what the judge is not saying is this. I'm here to compel the performance of a contract you're obviously not aware you're in, and you're in dishonor of the obligation. Again, your first W-4, 1040 filing created your agreement to be in relationship with the IRS. That's it. It's a contract. Ever wonder how the state has power over a business? We saw this very well, very obviously, in 2020, telling the business to be open or closed whenever they want, telling them for how many hours they can be open, telling them where to put their tables and where to put the chairs and how many feet between customers need to be, blah, blah, blah. Or, for example, how a doctor can only prescribe medicines that the medical board approves of. Right? The same doctor who spent 8+ years and almost $500,000 in student debt acquiring this degree can have their license taken away overnight just because that doctor is prescribing you hydroxychloroquine. Right? How many doctors lost their livelihood because of this? And they wonder, what happened? What happened to my rights? Why can't they do all this? Well, guess what? Because you entered the AMA contract, American Medical Association. It's a club. If you want to be a doctor and you want to practice in the public, you have to become part of the AMA club. It's the HOA of medicine. They can tell you what to do and not to do, what to say, what not to say, what to prescribe, what not to prescribe. And if you don't follow their rules, guess what? Revoked. Out of business overnight. Just as the business is contracted via a business license and permits, if you want to open a business, who do you have to ask for permission? Right? The state, county maybe, right? If you want to sell alcohol, what do you have to do? Get a permit for it. Right? All day, every day. Because when you're contracting with the state, whether individually or as a business, you get privileges and benefits, not rights. Because the state can't actually give you any rights. You already have all the rights that you need. You have God-given rights. The day you were born. But we've contracted ourselves out of them. And here's a good one. You may not be able to see it, I'll read it. For the right to travel. There's a bunch of videos online on YouTube and Instagram or wherever. You've probably seen them when Americans get pulled over and they say a bunch of things and the cop walks away. Or maybe they have one of those national passports, which I'll talk about too. And it has a do not detain code on it. And the police officer basically says, well, thank you, have a nice day, and then walk away. Right? So this is Americans now realizing we have to enforce our private right to travel. Why? Because here, American jurisprudence, constitutional law, it's law book. Paragraph 2125 says the right of interstate travel is a basic or fundamental right, not a privilege, recognized and guaranteed by the Constitution. The right of interstate travel is a basic or fundamental right, recognized and guaranteed by the United States Constitution and is virtually unqualified. The right to travel is constitutionally protected against private as well as public encroachment. How much money is being made with traffic tickets? Guess who makes all that money? The courts, the judges. The judges get a cut in every single court case. Why do you think courts don't shut down when the government does? They're fully self-funded organizations. Every single court case funds the courts. So let's go back to the driver's license. When you sign the contractual obligation of a driver's license and you register your vehicle with the state, you are now in the jurisdiction of that contract. They can revoke your privilege to drive. They can impound your car because it's not yours anymore. They're telling you in these contracts, do they attach the thousands and thousands of public traffic codes and regulations to your driver's license application? They don't. It's legal by omission, again. They don't have to tell you what the law is, right? So again, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Because the law is in the contract, not outside of it. Statutes and codes are only rules, the obligations of a contract. So let's talk about how this works in commerce and tax. So two things to keep in mind here. How are we doing, by the way? Are you enjoying this? Is it going over your head? Cool. So again, all of this is in more depth inside the fellowship. So two things to keep in mind as we go into the section. The money is the law, and you are the substance or the collateral or the backing for the money. FRNs, or Federal Reserve notes, are really private credit notes. Why? Because the Federal Reserve is a private bank. Who knows about that? Almost everyone at this point, right? Okay. So the obligatory per contract, or the obligation per contract, or the consent to use this private credit comes with lots of things attached, right? So how did they do this again? Timeline. Let's look at 1913, when Woodrow Wilson agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Banking Act of 1913. That's when the Federal Reserve was established. Okay? Again, it took them almost a century to finally get this done. And that's also the same year when the first income tax was created. And the IRS was established as a collection agency for the interest that is due on these newly issued private banking notes. Because you're using them. You're not using silver or gold to settle your debts. Right? Now you're using the Federal Reserve notes. But guess what? It's a private bank. So if you use those notes, there's stuff that you need to do. Compelling performance yet again. So let's move on to 1933. The Emergency Banking Act was signed by Roosevelt. What happened there? Well, it was another reorganization of the federal government, because technically the federal government went bankrupt. It was really a hypothecated bankruptcy in 1933. And then guess what? The Federal Reserve said, well, we'll keep funding your government if we get some things in return. Okay? For example, the gold. Executive Order 6102. Roosevelt signed the executive order of the president. I'm going to read this as it says here. All persons, there's that word again. All persons are required to deliver all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates now owned by them to a Federal Reserve bank, branch, or agency, or to any member bank of the Federal Reserve System. So in 1933, the federal government, through an executive order, told all Americans, you need to give us your gold. And most of us complied. Why? Because let's look down here. Criminal penalties for violation of executive order, $10,000 fine, or 10 years imprisonment, or both, as provided in Section 9 of the order. $10,000 in 1933, that was a lot of money. Right? But again, who has to deliver it? All persons. Well, we saw the definition for person, right? Well, what if you're not a person? Do you have to deliver your gold? No. So let's move on to Public Law 73-10, because with every injury there also has to be a remedy. And you can look this up again, Public Law 73-10, there's going to be another slide where it's both together. HJR 192, House Joint Resolution 192, because the money changed, they also had to change the underlying law with it. Because they took away gold and silver, and the backing for that, well, there had to be something to replace it, right? So, as it says here, these new Federal Reserve notes, heretofore after coined or issued, shall be legal tender for all debts, public and private, public charges, taxes, duties, and dues, etc., etc. So they changed the money. How could they do this? Well, because through a contract, right? So they took away the silver and gold remedy, but they gave us something else in return that we can use. So here's the two joint resolution and public law. You can look this up for yourself if you want. This was public policy, again, for 14th Amendment citizens only, that ended domestic convertibility to gold. And one thing I forgot to mention, before the Civil War broke out, again, all Americans had gold-backed and silver-backed currency. So you could walk into any bank, and the bank would give you, if you wanted to exchange and redeem your notes into gold or silver, the bank would do it, no questions asked, right? No KYC. So here's some pre-1933 money, $20 backed by gold, as it says on the bottom, $20 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. On demand, anytime, right? And it says on the left, you can see gold certificate. This certificate is a legal tender in the amount thereof in payment of all debts, public and private. And here is a $1 note that is backed by silver, $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. Again, same thing. These were certificates, these were not notes. Right? These were silver and gold certificates that had equal value to the gold that was stored in the banks. So legal tender versus lawful money. Again, we're dealing with this dualistic system. Legal tender, private Federal Reserve bank credit, debt held within the system. We hear about this debt-based economy and debt-based system. But very few people know what it actually means. It generates fees and taxes due because you're using these private credit notes. Now, lawful money, on the other hand, these are U.S. banknotes issued by the Treasury, or used to be issued by the Treasury, redeemable as lawful money, because the value was held in gold and silver, and no tax was generated for its use. Now, this is what we have today. This is the Federal Reserve note. And look how it has, again, two things on it. It has two stamps, one from the Federal Reserve and one from the U.S. Treasury. Two distinct serial numbers and two signatures, both from the Federal Reserve Commissioner, Treasurer, and then the Secretary of the Treasury. So what does that mean? Well, because they had to, in order to avert, basically, to commit perjury, they had to give us a remedy. So they basically combined the lawful money and legal tender into one single note and called the Federal Reserve note. So that gives you the option, the choice, which way do you want to deposit and utilize the Federal Reserve note, either as legal tender, that comes with all these strings attached, or as lawful money? And they tell you that also in the US Code. Well, when they took away the gold and silver, they had to replace it with something. And guess what they replaced it with? Every single one of you, and me. Every single baby born, every single American, was now the backing of the Federal Reserve currency. Why? Because we're actually producers. We actually get up in the morning, put on our pants, and go to work. We build stuff, we create stuff. We are the economy. Without us, there would be nothing. Right? So we're actually a lot more productive than just gold sitting in a vault. Hey, that's great. So now, just like when you buy a cow and you can project into the future how much milk that cow is going to make over its life, that's basically what they did to us. How much economic value can we extract from the US citizen over a lifetime? Right? This made us the backing of the currency. Money became backed by the people via our future labor because, again, how much economic value is the citizen going to make, and how much taxes can we extract from him or her? And that's how they basically assign a value to your birth certificate and all the other financial things that you engage with over your lifetime. And this created the taxation system and security bonds, property titles, all that jazz. So again, the men and women became the surety by volunteering to contract into the system, this new system, and became liable, therefore, to pay the debt obligation that really is the federal government's obligation, but they're passing it on to us. So the federal corporation is protected by bankruptcy courts. Not sure if you knew that, but yeah, can't come after them for bankruptcy. It's protected from its creditors, and guess who those are? Well, once again, we are. We're the credits. We are the creditors. We are the gold. So that, yes, on one side creates a huge liability and obligation, but once you find out there's this whole other world behind the curtain, which we're going to get into in a moment, where I can actually be the power behind it. I can discharge my debts. I don't have to pay them with more Federal Reserve notes, because how can you pay a debt with more debt? What sense does that make, right? So then, of course, 1974, Nixon finally moved to silver and international convertibility gold, because that's when they basically made the deal to settle all oil trades in US dollars, which created a perpetual demand for the Federal Reserve note, right? All right, so let's talk about the good stuff, the remedy. Let's take a deep breath. All right, remedy, a maxim of law. So what is a maxim? A maxim is an undisputable fact in law that cannot be changed, cannot be amended, cannot be edited, nothing. It has stood the test of time, and it's been there basically since the beginning of law. A maxim of law. Well, one of them says, every legal injury or a violation of a natural right, there should be a corresponding remedy provided by the law. And that's basically all we're focusing on in the fellowship. We're showing you how all these injuries to our God-given rights actually also have a remedy so we can take those rights back. So as it says here, again, in HJR 192, Public Law 73-10, every obligation heretofore or hereafter incurred, whether or not any such provision is contained therein or made with respect hereto, shall be discharged upon payment, dollar for dollar, in any coin or currency, which at the time of payment is legal tender for public and private debts. So to translate that out of legalese and into English, is that because we took away the gold, we have to give them another remedy to settle and close their debts. And we will call it discharge. So Americans, through this mechanism, now have, ever since 1933, basically have had the ability to discharge their debts without paying more Federal Reserve notes. But of course, they didn't tell you how, right? But there it is. They're giving you the option, they're giving you the right, the legal remedy to discharge your debts. So here it is in the U.S. Code, Title 12. They're telling you, the said notes shall be obligations to the United States, not to you, right? And shall be receivable by all national and member banks and Federal Reserve banks, and for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. Then it goes on to say, they shall be redeemed in lawful money. So notice how they're saying legal tender, and now they're talking about lawful money. So it's again the dual system, the two stamps on the dollar, You can redeem them either or. They shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand at the Treasury Department of the United States, City of Washington, District of Columbia, of any Federal Reserve Bank. Basically, any Federal Reserve Bank, any bank that you bank with, they're part of the Federal Reserve banking system. So you can redeem your Federal Reserve notes at any bank for lawful money, which cannot be taxed. The current monetary system, in a super simplified way, basically works like this. All debts are discharged either with legal tender or with the power of your pen. So one side, yes, we know the obligations of the contract. I have to pay my debts with Federal Reserve notes and use that as a promise to pay. Again, you're not paying anything. You're just tending the debt forward. You're pushing the debt forward to someone else. That's really what's happening. Or the other possibility is you discharge it with the power of the pen, with your signature. Because guess what creates the money? Your signature actually does. And they're telling you this too. I'll have a slide about that. So, as we know, the Federal Reserve note is a debt instrument. It's a promise to pay. Technically, the Federal Reserve note was only supposed to be a temporary bridge currency until the United States came out of bankruptcy, but of course they never did that. So tendering or discharging, right? So you tender the debt forward with the Federal Reserve note, or you discharge it, settle and close the obligation with your signature, because again, we the people are the currency of the system. Oh, the thing. All right. So, modern money mechanics. Who has heard about modern money mechanics? Anyone? Sometimes politicians, okay, sometimes politicians throw that term around. Well, this is a manual from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, and as they say, bankers discovered that they could make loans merely by giving their promises to pay. What? You're not even going to loan me anything? You're just going to give me a promise to pay? Okay, then down there it says transaction deposits are the modern counterpart of banknotes. Hold on a second. My deposit is equal to an actual note? It was a small step from printing notes to making book entries, crediting deposits of borrowers, which the borrower in turn could spend by writing checks, thereby printing their own money. So they're veiling this remedy here in very much thick weeds of legalese. What they're actually saying is that through the power of your signature, because you are the borrower and the depositor, you can print your own money. Yeah, but they don't tell you how, right here. So let me ask you this, if you get a loan from a bank, do they actually lend you anything if you start the process of creating credit? Do they go into the vault and hand you a bag of cash? All of a sudden, these digits appear in your account. You don't know where they came from, right? They don't actually lend you anything. Your signature creates the money. They're tapping into your collateralized security bond called a birth certificate and extending that value back to you plus interest. There is no equal consideration in the one-sided contract. So nobody truly loans any credit, and it's created with your signature. As again, the true creditors, as we pledged our energy and future labor, the substance behind the money, we volunteer to be liable for the federal debt, and contracts related to the 14th Amendment basically obligated us to do all of this. Now let's focus on all this from a lens of self-empowerment, because that's really what we're all here about, right? So there are 3 lawful tools for equitable remedy. Discharge of public debt, I hinted at that. Dissolution or dissolving of public contracts, and the power of inquiry. What is the power of inquiry? Well, your right to ask questions. When you get pulled over by a cop, they're asking you all kinds of questions, right? Well, who told you that you can't ask them some questions? Yeah, let's flip the script, okay? We all have the right to inquire into the lawfulness of any matter. Doesn't matter what it is. But they don't teach you that in school. What do they teach you? Mock trial, argue, defending, right? That's what they want you to do. They want you to argue and defend and fight. But in fact, we just have to ask the right questions, opt out of these contracts, and that's how we become free. This is how we step into the realm of self-governance. When you realize that the power of your word and your signature is actually what establishes the law. You can establish your own jurisdiction, you can establish your own law through the power of your word and your signature, and through the power of private contracts. You can set up your own private contracts, right? Who has heard of PMAs, private member associations? A few of you, okay. So we can create our own private clubs. All these billionaires have these private clubs and no one knows what's happening in there. No government goes in there, right? They don't pay any taxes on any of that. Well, guess what? They're establishing their own little bubble of jurisdiction without government oversight. Why? Because it's not in the public. Only private members can join the club and enjoy the benefits of the club. We can do the same thing because our essence and the soul and a living human being realizing that we're the true currency and we're actually the true power behind all of it. So our goal at the fellowship is to help you embody this power, learn it, remember it really, because we've had this power all along, execute it lawfully and peacefully. We're not about the lawfare kind of, fight the system, because we don't have to. All the remedies are peaceful and legal and lawful. And this is how you build a legacy that aligns with your life's calling and the generations that will come after you. We don't want to leave our kids with all this debt. The average American is what, 100K, 150K in debt or something like that, right? We don't want to pass it on to our kids. We just need to know how to stand on our private rights, how we can limit and settle challenges from the legal, commercial, and public system lawfully and honorably, again, without fighting. So this is how we stop predatory practices of the system with peace of mind, peace of heart, and peace of spirit. The time is now to break the spell, my friends. So let's talk about the foundation for self-governance, how this actually works. Like I said, the republic still exists, the protections by limited government and the power of land treaties all exist still. Divine jurisdiction, private contracts, trusts, treaty law, and equity jurisprudence. Like I said earlier to my friends here at the table, equity is the oldest law form known to man. It's mentioned in the Bible at least twice. It predates even common law. So equity is still operating today. Every judge knows about it. They can't do anything about it. Because equity is the spirit, is the soul of the law. When we bring equity to any legal or commercial matter, they have to yield and they have to discharge our obligations. So these are the 4 pathways that we have inside the fellowship, and I'll talk about each briefly. National status and passport, I'm the director of the pathway here. Learn all about the 14th Amendment, federal U.S. citizen status, how to safely volunteer out of that jurisdiction, and how to best utilize your new relationship to the corporate state. Trifecta pathway focuses on creating private entities such as private church ministries, powerfully created trusts, and unincorporated associations to support you in navigating these public systems from the private that minimizes public challenges. And of course, we have ongoing trustee training. Allodial land pathway. Living men and women who claim their lands are protected by treaties, and how one can claim freeholder land without encumbrances of the state, including taxation. Now, these land treaties were in place even before the Revolutionary War broke out. So, really what we're doing with the allodial land, and hundreds of thousands of Americans have claimed their allodial title. That's what it's called. Allodial title or land patent, sometimes also referred to as paper patents. Remember the stories of the old pioneers going out west and staking their claim? That's where that's coming from. You staked your claim, this land was now yours. And no government could tell you otherwise. You can build whatever you want, right? If there's oil, you drill it, it's yours. Mineral rights, all of it, come with it. Equity passage, like I said, this is the power of the pen to discharge all public debt obligations and learn that the legal system is all about commerce. It's bookkeeping. That's all it has been reduced to. Bookkeeping, commerce, contracts. And we are the currency of the system, and therefore we actually hold the power. The system just doesn't want you to know that. So the fellowship equips people to wield their administrative powers in the private while deftly navigating the public, be empowered to live informed and liberated lives, the practical application of structures and strategies to lawfully, peaceably preserve your wealth, protect your family, and secure your legacy. Again, when we break the spell, we realize that we are the currency of the system. We learn how to disembark from the corporate system, the mindset, and arrive back to expression and protection of the self-governance with knowledge, resulting in wise action. Again, the republic still exists together with all pertinent rights, treaties, protections, and responsibilities. It is up to us to claim it. So, this is us again. My name is Daniel Mentz. This is Michael Joseph, Marsha Anna Filmaderi. We will be here in November for the Exit and Build Land Summit, Freedom in Action. You can find out more about this Exit and Build. This is happening right here on Sovereignty Ranch. John Bush from Live Free Academy is hosting this whole thing. This is where we all come together, not just us from the lawful space, but these are the brightest, most brilliant minds in the freedom movement, in technology, in communications, in privacy, crypto, land stewardship, regenerative agriculture, all the things that we need to become sovereign people again. We're coming together, and this is not just a sit down and take a bunch of notes kind of thing. We're actually doing workshops all day. Whatever you're interested in, you can hop from one workshop to the other. Come to my national status passport workshop, then go over to regenerative farming, then go over to learning how to set up your crypto wallet. Whatever you want to do, it's like a pick your own adventure kind of thing. And it's going to be here for 4 days, November 5th through the 8th. You can get tickets at Exit and Build right now. They're super affordable. And then of course, Molly and her team will be here to host us all. So thank you, Molly.